Tell you about a RHEL stock mining camp in Mexico, folks staging for the end of Title 42.
Do you want me to get started, or do we want to give another minute?
We'll give it another minute for
Sure.
folks coming in. Thanks for all of you that got here at noon. But we'll give it another minute to see if any more folks pop in.
Okay, it looks like we have a few people in here now, so I can go ahead and get started. First of all, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shannon Dill. I'm the Solution Sales Specialist here at Ingram Micro for Red Hat. I also have our field resource, Kevin Hooks, joining today as well. The webinar is going to talk through RHEL 9. Everyone's going to be muted throughout the webinar, but if you have any questions or need anything, feel free to enter them in the chat and we can answer them at the end of the presentation. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter. His name is Rob Locke, Senior Solutions Architect for Red Hat Training and Certification Team. Happy to have you, Rob.
Thanks so much, Shannon.
Of course.
So, and welcome everyone to our little bit of a discussion about Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9, which was officially released just last week. Also with me today is Wes Urquhart. You may see him popping into the chat, and he will, whoop, somebody go on mute. Anyway, Wes will likely be going ahead and answering questions in chat or perhaps popping them into the conversation that we're going to have here. Our goal today is to talk a little bit about Red Hat Enterprise Linux and what it's looking to provide your organization and what we've been focusing on for the last few years since Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 was first introduced. Obviously, you've heard the stories, a lot of information about us focusing on the hybrid cloud journey that many of our organizations are on at this point. So as a quick sort of little outline of what we're looking to discuss today, you'll find that a lot of our materials are now focusing on what we term the pillars of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So I wanted to take a few moments at the beginning of this presentation to sort of identify those pillars for you so you can see how we're sort of positioning some of our technical features and program updates that are coming along. And then at the very end here, give you a chance to see for yourself. I'll bring up a RHEL 9 virtual machine. We'll see a little bit about how training is sort of giving us an opportunity to start to experiment with RHEL 9 for you. So to start this off, as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the pillars of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Now, let's remember, as a backdrop to this, is what is the value of a Red Hat subscription? You know, we bring to the table things like support and expertise, the various security resources. There's a large partner ecosystem surrounding RHEL. the life cycle support and flexibility. We'll talk a little more about life cycle a little later on here. We also can give you a little bit of a roadmap. You'll see us conveying that information about what's coming, what we've been doing, and so on. But one of the new things really is a lot of proactive analytics. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're tying that into our system. So along those lines, the first pillar that I want to talk about is to empower you to innovate within your environment. Some have claimed that Red Hat Enterprise Linux is a bit staid, doesn't necessarily move quick enough, that sort of thing. Well, we're here to sort of change that narrative a little bit to give you an opportunity to accelerate your innovation. We need to make this easier for you to build, deploy, scale, and manage your cloud native apps. So how are we doing that? Well, RHEL 9 is shipping with the latest GNU compiler collection, version 11, latest versions of LLVM, Rust, Go compilers. We've finished the transition to Python 3, delivering Python 3.9 to you. The goal here is that we're looking to have a faster release schedule, performance boosts, all of that, still maintaining that more consistent and stable internal APIs for you. Our second pillar is to streamline your infrastructure. How do we go about optimizing your environment? For example, we can optimize by providing a new image builder capabilities that we first introduced with RHEL 8. And so this environment can allow you to save time, ensure consistency when you're deploying, whether it's on-premise, whether it's virtualized, whether it's in the cloud, or even at the edge. Our third pillar has us talking about protecting. As we've shifted to the hybrid cloud, this has presented a whole host of security concerns for a lot of us. And so we're looking to be able to protect you, to establish that consistent security foundation, whether it's a function of having web console support for smart card authentication, whether it's changes to SSH to by default protect you from root logins, improved SE Linux performance, better tie-ins to OpenSCAP profiles and such. All of this focused on being able to protect your environment. And then our final pillar that we will put all of this into context with is that bottom line, we have worked hard each and every day to earn your trust, to allow you to operate with complete confidence in a platform, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, that you can be confident is going to work within your larger infrastructure. We're including things like kernel live patch management through our web console. We've got new system roles to allow you to make it easier to automate your manual tasks. Performance CoPilot, which can give you greater scalability. So all of these features that we're looking at bringing into your environment. So with those four pillars as sort of a backdrop, what are the underlying program updates that we've been making? Well, first, I do have to at least give a nod to Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.6. A lot of you may have noticed that we had sort of concurrent announcements happening at Summit earlier this month. RHEL 9.0 was released on May 18th, but RHEL 8.6 was released exactly 1 week earlier on May 11th. Many of the features that you're going to hear me talk about here are available today also on Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.6. The caveat, of course, being is that RHEL 8 has a shorter lifespan than RHEL 9 at this stage. Speaking of lifespan, what does a life cycle to RHEL look like? And so here is an outline of the RHEL 9 life cycle planning guide that we have up on our website. What you'll find is that we are focused on providing you support for 10 years. Now, you get full support for the first 5 years, and then we go into a maintenance phase, if you will, for the balance of the 10 years. And then for some customers who require some extension to that, there is an extended life phase that you can try to add on at the end of that. But be aware, what's the difference between these different support phases? In the full support phase, this is where you're getting the security advisories implemented. You're getting high priority bug fix advisories and maybe some enhancement advisories incorporated. With a minor release within the RHEL 9 lifecycle, that's where we tend to introduce support for additional hardware. We perhaps provide enhanced software functionality. Again, that more rapid evolution of things. And each minor release represents an accumulation of the security, bug fix, and enhancement advisories that have been released to date on that platform. The maintenance support phase, so in the second half of our support, we tend to back off a little bit. Yes, we're still providing the critical and important security advisories. We will select some of the urgent bug fix advisories, but understand that during maintenance phase, we're not doing any additional hardware enablement, nor are we intending to do any enhanced software functionality planned for those future minor releases. So what do the minor releases and such sort of look like for us? Well, here's a projected plan of what the RHEL 9 life cycle is going to look like for the next 10 years. What you'll see is that we are typically looking to put in about every 6 months a new minor release. So again, that's where the hardware enablement will come in. That's where perhaps some enhanced software functionality may come in as we rebase various application streams that are being incorporated into RHEL. What you'll see is that each even release does have an extended update support. While we don't encourage this, we do find that some of our partners like to certify their products, their stacks on particular minor releases. And so with that, we will provide extended update support on that minor release, but we are telling you here in advance which minor releases are going to be the ones offering that extended update support. So there's no guessing game for you. But notice with a 6-month term between minor releases, we get up to 9.10, and that will be the final minor release because we will be leaving the full support phase and shifting to maintenance. So this gives you sort of a view of how these things are relating. Now, if you were to look on our website at the planning guide, you'll find that Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 looks basically the same. And so this lifecycle support is quite similar, though the minor releases that we're providing the extended update support were a little wonky up front, but we've now consistently tied it into the even one. So 8.6, for example, will be one offering extended update support. But note that with RHEL 8, we're already 3 years into the 10-year lifespan. We only have 2 more years of any additional hardware enablement as you're looking to put this on physical machines. Of course, virtual machines sort of extend this a little further for us, and we don't have to worry about that hardware enablement as much. So these are our life cycle views for RHEL 9. One of the other big program updates that we are making with RHEL 9 is, well, hopefully you already know about this, the Red Hat developer subscription that we have been offering now for individuals for a couple of years. The idea here is that you, as an individual developer, can get a single subscription to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So you don't have to necessarily go off to Fedora or go off to CentOS Streams to be able to work with something that's similar to what you're building may want to ultimately deploy to. You can be running it on the same exact Red Hat Enterprise Linux to develop, test, and get it ready to deploy into production. Now, this subscription supports you deploying RHEL on either physical or virtual nodes, but it's also deployable on major public clouds. Right? Now, admittedly, in the developer program, it's assumed that you're self-supporting, but you can take each of those minor releases, each of the security advisories, bug fix advisories that come out in between minor releases, and go ahead and apply those to your environment. This is all done self-service through the developer program on our website. I'll have the URL for that a little bit later on. We've had this developer subscription for quite some time. What is changing now, though, with RHEL 9 is that many organizations have come to us and said, you know, we want to be able to build our environment as a team. And so instead of an individual developer subscription, we have just introduced developer subscription for teams. And this is for organizations that want to be able to support developer nodes. Now, again, this is expected to not be your production environment, what you're rolling out to perform the business that you do. It is here for organizations to be able to develop and build their environments. But again, enabling that tighter coupling between what you're building on to what you're going to transition to your production environments. Now, some other things program-wise, things that are new in the platform. Obviously with RHEL 9, we've gotten a bump to the kernel. Remember, the kernel is the heart of that operating system, that bridge between the services, the applications that you're running, and the hardware of your system. That kernel has been updated to 5.14. It is providing support for the latest hardware. It has improved USB 4 support, for example, but also has a couple of key features we want to make mention of. One of those features is that WireGuard is enabled. You know, traditionally, VPN support has been a user space application running on top of the Linux environment. Well, WireGuard is an actual kernel module. And so now we can just simply have a lightweight service tied into that kernel module, which should give us greater cryptography support and faster response times for working through the VPN. This is provided as a tech preview on 9.0, but is something that we expect more folks are going to be working with. What is also changed with 5.14 is the core scheduling. We are enabling simultaneous multi-threading across the CPU cores. While we expect that this is going to improve performance for most workloads, what this is really interesting to help with is to mitigate some of the vulnerabilities that were introduced or discovered with things like Spectre and Meltdown. Another thing that we have announced support for this year, on January 1st, we introduced support for RHEL on ARM. And so this now means that we can run this same OS on an additional platform. And so I've got here on the slide the official RHEL 9 supported architectures. And so for many of us, the traditional x86-64 that we work with, but we also have continue to support Power processors and IBM Z series. Now what's been added is the ARM architecture. Caveat, all right, this does not support Raspberry Pi. All right, so just putting that out there right away. But for the ARM architectures that we're finding out in our edge environments and in some cloud servers, this is now available worldwide and available in all the different subscription options, from standard to premium to smart management. So growing our footprint, growing our availability. Speaking of the edge, Red Hat Enterprise Linux for the edge is now focused on us moving beyond the cloud servers that we have, but going ahead and supporting those organizations that are depositing things out on that edge. Of course, management of the edge represents additional concerns, right? You know, how do I do that remote updating, major release upgrades, and so on, without having to travel to and touch those edge devices? And so zero-touch provisioning, having better visibility into the health of those edge devices, being able to perform the needed security remediation in a timely fashion. All right, all of that is now being incorporated here into what we're offering, and has been a really strong focus for us over the last couple of years as we introduce that into RHEL. Another program update is an introduction of Red Hat Enterprise Linux for workstations. Now, this is not us going, oh, it's the year of the Linux desktop again. No, when we say workstations here, we are talking about that sort of high-end demanding applications. You know, maybe you're, building animation, other visual effects, or maybe you're in the scientific computing area wanting to do additional workloads there. That's the sort of thing we're talking about with RHEL for Workstation. You know, part of the advantage here is that RHEL for Workstation now means we have a Linux workstation designed for those professionals that's giving us that full 10-year life cycle. You know, still the same certified hardware, still the enterprise support, the whole partner ecosystem can be built on top of this. And so workstations being able to run this. Of course, the desktop world, part of this also includes things like a move up into GNOME 40. We have that available both in the desktop variant and the workstation variant. New environments, new improvements within the graphical world. All right, so those are the program features that we've been talking about. Now let's dive in a little bit deeper and talk about some of the technical features that are being introduced with RHEL 9. Remember our pillars, all right? So we started off by talking about innovating and wanting to be able to stay current with a lot of things. So we've simplified the developer experience here. What that means is we have the latest development tools. We started with new versions of those tools, but we've also redefined application streams, which we introduced in RHEL 8. So we have base OS, which is that core OS, the minimal elements needed to just get the kernel and some basic support infrastructures. But then the user space tooling and applications are placed in app streams. And we've traditionally built some of those as modules, you may remember with RHEL 8. Modules which allowed you to perhaps have both Python 3 and Python 2 installed concurrently on that system so that you could be building for either environment as you were transitioning to Python 3. So app streams and modules giving you the ability to build some of that stuff. But we also realize that sometimes app streams isn't itself quick enough for you. And so Code Ready Linux Builder provides you with access to even later tooling. The other thing we've added support for are flat packs. For those in a desktop environment, you may have heard about a new packaging mechanism which allows you to pull down elements that perhaps are newer and maybe platform agnostic to a bit. We have finished our migration to Python 3, so there is no Python 2 on RHEL 9. If you want Python 2, go back to RHEL 8. Again, Python 2 itself, retired, dead. It's no longer being supported by the Python community, hasn't been for a little while now, and so we have finished that migration. RHEL 9 is also the first one that is built and based on CentOS streams. And so if you are interested in contributing to the app streams, contributing to the base OS and such, or working with that, downloading and implementing CentOS streams might be a way for you to integrate with the community as to what's coming next in RHEL. Now, I mentioned with the developer environment, I'd have the URL for you. And so it's up here for that individual developer subscription. One of the most interesting things I find with developers.redhat.com is the sheer volume of content that we are contributing and putting into this environment. There are fascinating blogs, articles, how-tos, all placed up here for you to be able to research and learn and see lots of different things you can be doing with Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Maybe you're just getting started on a container adoption journey. Well, you can find out some information about how to run containers directly on your RHEL box, all there in developers.redhat.com. So we've redesigned, trying to make it a little bit easier for developers to get to the information that they need. And so a lot of work being done here. Again, part of innovation is making sure that we have the latest versions of things running. And so Podman 4.0 is included with RHEL 9. This gives us better DNS name resolution, improved IPv6 support. The UBI images have also been expanded. Those universal base images can be used to create your own containers, and they come in different flavors, from standard to micro to minimal to init. What this means is what's by default included in that starter container image, but it could be size-wise, with the init image only 7.5 meg, all the way up to standard, which is at a size of 80 meg, which, by the way, is smaller than it was in RHEL 8. And so we have been working on sort of grooming that a little bit to make for tighter and smarter universal base images. The other thing we've enabled by default in the kernel are C groups version 2. We had introduced version 2 before, but C group 2 is now enabled by default on your fresh installs. What you may have realized with C groups is that in version 1, there really wasn't a lot of standardization between many of those definitions and resources that we were trying to constrain. With C group 2, we've now made better definitions and such. And so it now is easier to understand what resources are being controlled where. So that's now enabled by default. So let's move on to our second pillar, optimize. What are some of the technical features that have been introduced here? Well, I had already mentioned the image builder environment. What we've introduced here with RHEL 9 is an actual image builder service. So, software as a service. Traditionally with image builder in RHEL 8, you had to establish your own infrastructure to be able to support image builder. Now, Red Hat is offering you a service for image builder where you can take advantage of us having that infrastructure created and built. Now, the beauty of the image builder service is that you can go through and build, bare metal images, you can build virtual machine images, you can build container images, whatever you need, and it builds consistently across them. The image builder has been enhanced to support better bare metal deployments. You can, in essence, create the installation media that's necessary to deploy to that bare metal. It'll have a built-in kickstart. The whole process is automated. You just pop in that media and away it goes. We've also offering customized file system support. This means we can have multiple mount points rather than just a single large root file system historically. How do you go about using Image Builder? Well, first we choose the platform we're looking to build for. Is this image going out to physical, to private cloud, public cloud, or the edge? Then, do we want to use the Image Builder service that we're offering? You can get to that through console.redhat.com. Or do you have your already on-premise private build environment that you've constructed? You then create a blueprint where you define all of the elements of that image, then click build. It'll go out and build the image for us, to run on whatever platform we had chosen. And then we can go ahead and download, publish, or push that image out to the particular platform that we built for. So this is the concept of building images. And we are looking to make it easier for you to automate, make it easier for you to create consistent environments, optimizing, reducing your toil. Let's look at our third pillar, that is protect. RHEL 9 is more hardened by default. Now, what does this mean? Well, we've improved the SE Linux performance, really focused on some of the elements there. One that, frankly, might bite you is root login for SSH is disabled by default now. You cannot use a password to be able to log in as root. Again, a lot of us have been trying to move SSH to another port, security by obscurity, to cut down on the script kiddies, that are running and trying to connect into our systems with a password. Well, with password disabled by default, even if you're on port 22, they're not going to get in. So you have to have a key to be able to get in. The other thing we've been working with is many of you may know that some of your encryption protocols are weaker than others. And so there are methods of brute force that can perhaps tie into that. And so we have been gradually culling some of those. And so in RHEL 9, we have disabled SHA-1 as an encryption method by default also. As we mentioned, C Group 2 already is there, and this should also make your environment more secure as your definitions for resource utilization are clearer and more consistent. We're also ready to comply, and so we support more of the security endeavors that various government organizations have put in. We've expanded the OpenSCAP profile to be able to comply with more environments. So support for all of these elements are here to better protect your system. Our last pillar is talking about trust. So how do we earn that trust? Well, for a lot of it is to automate more of the tasks you and I need to do. And so we're introducing additional system roles. These roles can go through and configure a box, again, in a very consistent way so that you can trust your environment. You can trust that it is operating the way you expect it to be operating. And so with these system roles, they are Ansible roles that in essence can configure your box to be a firewall, to be an HA cluster, to support an SAP instance, maybe to be a web console and enable that element. So all of these system roles looking to make it easier for you to manage your environment and trust your environment. We've made improvements to the high availability component to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We've introduced additional fencing agents to support more physical platforms in your data center. And again, remember, the purpose of high availability is to make sure that your applications keep running. And so this can go through and support those. We also have full support for cluster system roles so that we can go ahead and apply those roles to the elements within your cluster. The web console. Web console provides a new method for us to be managing these remote systems. And so from that example web console you see there, I can see different performance statistics. I can see that there are 2 CPUs. I can see how much RAM is being utilized, how much swap is being utilized, which services are using most of each of those. Am I running out of disk space? What's my network bandwidth going on? I can even graph some of these elements to see what the utilization has been over time. But we've also added in the ability to do some administrative tasks through this web console. So not only just seeing some performance metrics, but also being able to go out there and do, for example, kernel live patching. Kernel live patching, which allows you to patch the running kernel without having to reboot. This will allow you to maintain your systems running, but trust that that security advisory has been applied. Now, the web console has support for escalating privileges through sudo as people get connected in, or to use SSH to make the connection, and then smart card authentication as another way of protecting access to that web console. The other interesting element is the web console is now becoming one of the preferred methods for bringing up virtual machine consoles. For those of you that may have been used to using Virt Manager to manage virtual machines on a local system, web console would now be the preferred method of doing that as Virt Manager is being deprecated. Did you know that the web console also works from a mobile device? So it's not Friday yet, but I'm sure on Friday, as the weather gets better, we all would prefer to be out on the golf course, right? And so as you're sitting there and you get that alert, you can bring up the web console on your mobile device on the 14th tee, fix that, check the logs, monitor the help, resolve the issue in time for your turn to take that swing. So web console now also working on a mobile device. We've also improved the scalability of Performance CoPilot, which is integrated into the web console. This will provide you much more detailed performance analysis being tied into this. But doing performance and security adherence and all of these things that you're looking to trust your environment, what about offering that as a service? Well, that's where Red Hat Insights comes into play, right? So some of the new things that we've introduced with Red Hat Insights here in Q2 are some new services focused on resource optimization, but also to investigate if any malware that we're aware of has been introduced. But our goal here with Insights is to be able to give you that broad spectrum view of your environment, be able to know which systems are currently patched, which systems are not, which systems are compliant at uploading their reports to Insights, and which systems are not. So being able to have that bigger picture view as a service tied into your systems. Well, what about Red Hat Satellite? Well, for those of you where your systems are not connected to the public internet and therefore able to upload their information to our public service, Red Hat's Insights, you can establish an on-premise sort of management of those systems with Red Hat Satellite. And so just as sort of a little footnote here, Red Hat Satellite will be able to start managing RHEL 9 hosts this summer with the introduction of Satellite 6.11. All right, nothing you're going to have to do, just register those RHEL 9 systems to that later rendition of Satellite, and you will be off and running, performing all of those features that you need for RHEL 9. All right, so our last bit that we wanted to go through today is to give you a chance to sort of see for yourself how some of these things are available. One thing I would encourage you to do is to perhaps register for an individual developer subscription. You can go ahead and download RHEL 9 and begin to prototype and experiment and play and figure out how RHEL 9 is going to work for you. What you can also, though, do is, since I am part of the training and certification team, is that you can look to our Linux curriculum for RHEL 9. And so we have updated our foundational Linux curriculum this week. I'm not sure, the announcement was supposed to come out right before this presentation, but it's coming out this week. We have updated the foundational courses of RH 124 and RH 134 to reflect changes that have happened in RHEL 9. Tied into that, of course, is our certification exam, the Red Hat Certified System Administrator, RHCSA. So all three of those are being delivered this week. Other courses that are being updated, which I know are in development and I can't really give dates on, but shouldn't be too far off. RH 199, which is the RHCSA Rapid Track course. That's a combination of RH 124 and RH 134, taking the 10 days of training of those two courses down to 5 days of training in RH 199. It's intended as a course for those of you that are experienced Linux admins, perhaps looking for the fine points of, well, how does Red Hat do these things in Linux? or maybe you're a very experienced HPUX administrator and you're shifting over to Linux. 199 might be an appropriate choice for you. The other one is to sort of round out our Red Hat Certified Engineer program. RH294 is also being worked on, and the corresponding exam that's associated with that. But let me give you sort of a little taste of what we're looking to have there. I want to show you sort of an example in RH124 for RHEL 9. This is actually from chapter 12 of RH124. I'm going to show you sections 12.7 and 12.8 from that course. One of the things that is changing with RHEL 9, and we introduced and warned you that this was coming back in RHEL 7. All right. Most of us didn't pay attention in 7. We were reminded in RHEL 8 that this was coming. And some of us didn't bother to finish the migration. What's happening is how you go about configuring networking. And so now in RHEL 9, the rubber has met the road, and we really need to retire our if CFG files. Now, I will let you know that if you are in an upgrade situation, you've got a RHEL 7 or a RHEL 8 system that is using if config files, you can upgrade that system to RHEL 9, and it will process those if config files and be able to have networking up and running. But if you're doing a fresh install, don't try to do if config files. I tried, it didn't work. But my upgrades continued to function. But at some point, you're going to be wanting to make changes, update things, that sort of stuff. We really need to move on. This all really started coming into being with the introduction of Network Manager to manage our network connections. And so now we have this concept of connections versus devices. And so there's an introduction of NM connection files.
Hi, this is Mary with Medicare Benefits. How are you doing today?
Introduction of NM connection files to ultimately replace the if CFG files. Now, to manage this, you can use a command line tool called NMCLI, which is talked about earlier in chapter 12. What I wanted to do was to give you sort of a little bit of a view of some of the information that is available in the book related to the NM connection files. So let me go ahead and see if this is bringing down. Okay. Can everyone see the online version of the book through the Red Hat Learning subscription?
We can, yeah.
Good. All right. And so as I mentioned, this is section 12.7. And you'll see here in the book, it's talking about editing those network connection files. And so it talks about the retirement of the if config format. But as we go down, one of the nice things is this little table, which in essence shows us what the NMCLI command line would be that we had just taught you in the previous section, and what the corresponding syntax would be in the NM connection file. Now, the NM connection file is designed to be much like an INI file, that you have perhaps worked with on other platforms. And so it's broken into sections. There's an IPv4 section, and then you have key value pairs within each of those sections. And so if we wanted the IPv4 address to be configured statically, we could specify in IPv4 method equals manual versus in the next row there, method equals auto, which is where we're configuring it to look to a DHCP server. And so all of these various methods, all of these various key value pairs identified here. It then later on gives us sort of an example of what that connection file might look like. And so there we see an example where the connection definition or section identifies some elements in general. Under IPv4, the method has been set to auto, and even some Ethernet elements identifying the MAC address that we would like this system to have. After making changes to the file, we need to make sure that the permissions are set appropriately, and that we then run nmcli to reload to tell Network Manager that we've made a change to one of the files under its hood. And then nmcli con up will bring up that edited file. And so, as done with many of the elements within our courses, we go from talking about a lecture on what we would like to see you do, and then a corresponding guided exercise. And so this guided exercise is telling me to go through and get on a workstation machine, use the lab command to go ahead and prepare things. All right, so on the workstation machine, use the SSH command to log into server A. So let me have another tab here, the VM console. Here you can see that I've got the workstation terminal open. I've already run the lab start command, but the next thing it wanted me to do was to SSH over to server A. And so I've done that. I'm logged in as student. It has me investigating some things about the system to see, well, what interfaces do I have? What connections are currently being used, and does that connection exist there? So let's take a look at that. I can run IP link, and I see my Ethernet connection named here ETH0 is currently defined. It has alternate names, ENP0S3 and ENS3, just other ways to refer to the device, but IP link showing me that device information. It then wanted me to do an nmcli, let's see, it was con show active. And we see that we have a single active connection. Notice over on the right, it is linked to device ETH0. So I can go ahead here and do an ls of etc network manager system connections. I'm forgetting the directory. Yes, oh, system dash, I was doing a dot. Oh, well, there we go. And in here, I see the wired connection file. If I take a look at that file, oh, I can't. So sudo -i to become the person that is allowed to access that file. And here I can see the elements of what's in there. The connection information, the Ethernet, the IPv4 information. We can see that it's statically assigned. We can see some IPv6 stuff, which we're not using, and that. So what does the exercise want me to do after that? It wants me to edit that NM connection file and go ahead and add a line to give it a secondary IP address of 10.0.1.1. So I'll go ahead and edit that file. I'll come down here just below address 1. I will add address 2 and its IP address. Now you'll notice on address 2 that I just have an IP address where address 1 had a comma and it looks like another address. That address is the gateway, the router that is tied to that network. All right, and then DNS is a separate line that we see there. So I've made that change. We'll go ahead and save it. Now, you may recall that when I edit the file, I've got to run a couple of commands to activate that change. Well, let me look back at the guided exercise to see what it's suggesting. I've made the edit. Yep, I need to do a con reload, and then I do a con up. And then I can go ahead and take a look at what IP addresses have been applied. So nmcli con reload, nmcli con up, wired connection 1. We see it's been activated. If I take a look at the addresses for ETH0, I see the original address, 172.25.250.10, and I see my new address, 10.0.1.1. Now, the exercise has us continuing along and going ahead and establishing a corresponding same network IP address on a second system. And then we can ping between the two to confirm that the address is actually working. Because right now, I don't really have a way to test this. But that's stuff that you can do when coming back to that system. So that's an example of some of the types of things that we can go ahead and do in our classes. So what did we discuss today? We talked about the pillars of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We talked about the program updates that have occurred. We've talked about a bunch of technical features, and we got a chance to see for ourselves. So, are there any questions?
Nothing in
Okay,
the chat,
well-
Rob.
Oh, did someone write in the chat? I don't.
Sorry, I was just telling Rob. I don't know if Rob can see it while he's presenting, so I was just letting him know there's nothing there in the chat for me. You did a great job.
Oh, okay, perfect. Well, in that case, thank you so much, Rob. Always a pleasure. And thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully we'll see you next time. Look forward to working with you soon.
Bye-bye, everyone.